Welcome everybody to Learning Content for Business Continuity. I'm Samantha here with SAP Litmos, and let's get started. I'm Samantha. I'm the content director here with SAP Litmos. I've been with the company for several years, about 4 years now, formerly with Calidus Cloud as well. And I'm here with my wonderful colleague Danielle Rigby, who's our director of learning.
Hi everyone, it's nice to be here, nice to be invited along. So I'm the Director of Learning based over in the UK. Similarly to Sam, I've been with the company for about 4.5 years now, so mainly focusing on our content, our soft skills content and the creation of that. So if you do have any questions about that, do stick them in the chat and then we can address them at the end. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat with you all today.
Great, so what we are going to cover today, really a rich agenda, a lot of information. We're going to try to move through it so that we do have enough time for questions at the end, but we're going to talk about what's been happening here, obviously, in probably the strangest year of most of our lives last year, and what happened with employee skills and companies as we all navigated the pandemic, and what businesses had to do to get through that. And that involved obviously a lot of rapid reskilling and upskilling, and we're going to talk about that, and why it requires a marathon mindset, why there's been a change from, oh, we're just going to make some quick changes and then it's done, versus what we're all still experiencing, which is that it really is it's a longer view than that. We're going to talk about the marathon mindset, and we'll discuss, this is Danielle's expertise, things like how learners forget, and we'll talk a bit about the forgetting curve and things like that, and how to get people past that forgetting curve into a thrive state versus a survive state, and how you can help your learners thrive. And so we'll give some tips on that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about content. Again, that's Danny's expertise, and maybe give you some tips on stuff that you can be doing to help, again, get your learners to thrive and be able to make it with a marathon mindset. So let's take it from there. So this is a little bit of a long statement, and you can go ahead and read it on your own, obviously, but it really is true, and as proven by the last year, that companies really are only as strong as their people and, frankly, their technology. And you need to have both in order to get people through especially unusual times. And what we've seen, and what we're talking a lot about at Litmos, is that a lot of companies right now are seeking what we're calling an adaptivity advantage, because adaptivity truly is maybe the biggest business advantage right now, which means that companies need ways to be able to make agile moves, fast moves, to get, potentially sort of refocus, reshift the entire business in various ways. But obviously what we're going to talk about today is that training is obviously one of those ways. And if you don't have the pieces in place to be able to train people quickly, unfortunately, as you can see here on the slide, that 50+ billion companies filed for bankruptcy last year. And one of the ways to obviously avoid that is to be able to train people, upskill, reskill very, very quickly. We've all learned, we've learned that lesson the hard way, unfortunately, in the last year. So, and I'm going to kind of kick this over to Danny a bit, but obviously, so what we saw last year was companies that were able to rapidly switch, companies that were doing in-person training who had to make, we have many great customer examples that literally did this in weeks, went from either hybrid models where they were doing a lot of in-person training to then switching to completely online, again, within weeks. We have, a couple of great case studies on this. The companies who were able to do that, really, when again, we're going to talk about thriving here going forward, but there are even examples. I'll just quickly, before I hand this over to Danny, we have an example. This is not a Litmos customer, but companies like Scandinavian Airlines, that they, rather than having to lay off about 90% of their in-cabin staff, their flight attendant staff, they actually offered those employees a rapid reskilling program where they could become medical assistants or teaching assistants. So not only did they not lay off their people, they actually said, we'll offer you these 2 different short-term careers because we do plan on bringing you back when things get back to normal. And they reskilled those people, kept them on the payroll, didn't have to lay them off, and they went and helped out 2 other industries. They helped out the medical industry and they helped out the teaching industry. So examples like that are just fabulous right now when we hear about these adaptable companies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in terms of like rapid switch into online learning, there's been so many examples where we have to switch. There is no other option. And you may have had in your business a lot of face-to-face learning. If you're very hands-on at manufacturing, we've found especially the automotive industry, everything that requires you to actually physically be there has been really hard hit. So the Scandinavian Airlines is a great example of how you can actually maximize the people within your teams. People have like a plethora of skills, so why wouldn't you use those skills to kind of adapt to another role, even if it's short term? But I suppose the thing that we've got to be mindful of is not to have too high expectations at the start, because this is where we now need to plan for longevity. So we've only been in this situation for the best part of a year now, which is actually still, it's, even though it probably feels different, it's a new way of working. And we will be working this way for many of us for a long time, as businesses decide to adapt regardless of whether the end of the pandemic's in sight or not. So the adaptations people need to make will become a normal way of working for a long time. So we have just got to make sure that we plan for that, and especially enablement for people's roles as well. So what we need to do is be asking our people what they need. We shouldn't assume what they need, because as L&D professionals, we can't say, oh yeah, I know what every single person in my business of 50,000 people, I know how they work, I know what they need. So definitely check in with people in your teams to see what they require, what they would like to see from you as a team, and what sort of resources would be good to be rolled out. And remember, like, one size doesn't fit all in this situation. So so I'd definitely be mindful of that. And I suppose, yeah, accessible content. So, and we don't just mean online learning, that is obviously the world that we come from, but having different expectations around what learning is, how we can go about it, and what we can engage in, whether that's podcasts, whether that's books, and whether we bring that together to form a kind of really cool sort of learning culture within a business. Don't just fall back on the fact that, oh, we have e-learning content. There is so much more that we can sort of grow from that.
Yeah, and I actually even love this piece in the quote here from Josh Burst and Danny about that. I mean, when you think about 40% of Americans changed jobs in 2020, and when you really think about that, and you think, 40% of those people had to basically completely learn something new. How would you do that without ample training? And of course it's online right now. So anyway, it's just fascinating to me that the number that number is that high.
Yeah, definitely. We would have never anticipated that if someone had said that a few years ago. Oh, 40% of Americans will need to change their job. It would be like, what happened to make that happen? So yeah, it's crazy to think.
Yeah, and so this is kind of a similar quote. We work a lot with Brandon Hall Group as a partner and an analyst, and this is just sort of an interesting little tidbit here that that those people who are being reskilled and are going to return to different jobs, going forward, and that 43, the quote is 43% of businesses are concerned about determining whether they'll be going to their old jobs or new jobs. So it's just another way of sort of framing the challenge right now, which is like continuing to train people with, are they going back to the same job they had before, and if so, is it just the same set of skills to do that, or do they need a different set of skills, given that now maybe they're online if they were in an in-person environment before? A lot of people who maybe were, for example, on a retail sales floor or something, and now they're going to be doing it, in an online, they're going to be a phone consultant or whatever. Companies are really having to address this idea of sending people, even if it's sort of the same job, do they need different skills to do that job in a different environment?
Yeah, and obviously if businesses are concerned about this, then the employees will be as well, and that's something that we can't ignore. I mean, people aren't stupid. They're not. These stats are out there saying this many businesses are concerned. So obviously the people behind those businesses are going to be concerned. So especially if people haven't been back to work since the start of the pandemic, or they have to completely change the location of the work. So this is where our continuity planning can come in and sort of, like you said, like you mentioned earlier, reskill your workforce to sort of maximize the skills that are available to us.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this, the marathon mindset. As all of you know on the call today, business continuity planning in the past was more of an event-based strategy. There were, when we would think of business continuity planning, you would be thinking about things like a natural disaster, a fire, some sort of weather event, even things like a cyber security breach. But they were a time-based event. It was like, days, maybe weeks of planning to figure out how we're going to navigate our way through that particular crisis. And what's changed in the last year and what we've all faced is that now we have to realize that business continuity planning is not necessarily something that's limited to days or weeks. And as we know, it may be a year or more. And that's why we're talking now about a marathon mindset of being able to actually have continuity planning that lasts for quite a bit of time, year plus.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of our planning and what we've done, we've actually put together, our content team have worked hard to put together a business continuity planning course, just so that we're sort of helping people out and showing them how they can do that. But it is hard to focus on an end point that has not been set. We've never been asked to do it in the history of our working lives. There has always been an end game, there's always been an end date. So even when world governments can't agree and are relaying contradictory information everywhere you look. So what we need to do is plan for the worst case scenario for a long period of time. And I mean, we shouldn't be giving false hope to our staff, or like a speculated end date, or a wanted end date from our point of view, because people are going to take what we say really seriously as managers. So I wouldn't fall into the trap of trying to make someone feel better by giving them a timescale that holds no certainty, especially when we haven't been given certainty by our sort of world leaders at this time.
Yeah, and I think as that applies to training, it's not like, oh, here's one course and you do this course and this is going to help us get through this crisis. It's really more about learning paths, because, and thinking longer term in regard to training as well.
Definitely, and making those plans and sort of making sure that we've got a long-term plan in place. Like I say, that's what we've been helping clients to do at this moment in time. So yeah, plan for something without an end date, which is like I say, something we've never been asked to do. But yeah, so I suppose this cushioning the change. So this is hopefully we can give you a few good examples here of some things that our clients have been doing. But sort of a term that's been sort of thrashed around quite a lot recently is virtual fatigue, but I feel like it's an actual real thing. So some of the things obviously down the side there, so sending blue light glasses to their teams. This is something that I'm aware a client has done for their teams. So at the moment, it's the only way that we are communicating. Where previously where the world would be face-to-face meetings, of conferences, of seminars, you could have a full lunch hour away from your screen. So one company sent blue light glasses to the team members to sort of combat like headaches and any virtual fatigue that they would be feeling because of that, which I think is a really sort of it's a really caring way of acknowledging kind of the change in people's work behaviour. So yeah, also we've got the 40-minute meetings. If we can, consider it one way. So if you need to collaborate and have 6 meetings in a day, and every single meeting was an hour, you're on all the time, visible to people, interacting with people for 6 hours a day. So that's not usually how we work when we're in an office. You would have breaks, you would have a chat with people, you would go into meetings face to face. and have a lot more time between meetings. So having a set time of like 40 minutes to go into a meeting and discuss the agenda would be a really good way of sort of planning that, or maybe making it a maximum of 50 minutes, so it gives people a lot more time in between. A really good one, actually, I thought this was a really nice way to look after people's health and well-being, was sending vitamin D supplements. So obviously in the UK especially right now, it's very dark, it's wintry and no one's really getting outside in any sort of sun. What one company done is sent vitamin D supplements to all the team members, and I feel like that just shows that you're caring for your staff, you're caring for their health, and it's just a really small gesture to do for your team, or to roll out a company-wide initiative, just something small. And I think that staff have fed back that they've really appreciated that as well. But yeah, so days with no meetings, that's one that we've sort of done with an SAP as well. So in the UK, we've been told to have no meetings on Fridays. Whether people have stuck to that or not is kind of down to the individual managers. But it is a good thing to do, so you can actually be productive rather than just look productive. So that's a good one. And then the 5-minute cushion. I know we were discussing this the other day about starting your meetings 5 minutes after the hour, so that gives people a chance to move between meetings, or get a little bit of small talk out the way first, and then sort of go into your main topic. So, and I think the rules don't even have to apply team wide, so they all start with one person. So you could be that person who makes that conscious change and takes the time back. So you don't have to be like the main person in that meeting. You can be deliberate with your own meetings, your own time, and when you have to go, just say I have to go, and just sort of put that boundary in with your time, and I think people will follow the leader in that sense.
Yeah, I love this, Dan. I love some of those examples of, I know you speak with our clients a lot, and I love the blue light glasses and the vitamin D and all that, and just the little things that you can do to keep people feeling supported. And I know, I think this happened to all of us, you guys over in the UK as well, but SAP sent us masks, I got 2 masks in the mail from SAP, and I thought, that's really cool. That just the little things to be shown support from the company, and to keep everybody charged to the best of their ability.
Yeah,
the
definitely.
little
Yeah.
I love our, sites, small gestures, big impact. It's the little things sometimes that you go, okay, that's really cool as an employee to carry on.
Yeah, I sent my team cupcakes last year. Hopefully they're still working off the back of them. So, yeah, just everyone got some cupcakes, which was nice. But I think as the pandemic's gone on, people want more healthier things, don't they?
Maybe we'll stick with the vitamin D.
Yeah, we'll stick with that.
This kind of ties back, I think, a little bit to sort of that the fatigue, the screen fatigue that people have, where, now that everybody's 100% online, and just like Danny was talking about, where if you formerly were in an office and you had human interaction, and it was, a sort of more maybe a natural environment versus doing everything on screen. I think it's exaggerated now that everything's on screen, and we are so even more flooded with just digital information just piled on. And as everyone on this call probably knows, as L&D people, the Ebbinghaus curve, the forgetting curve. I mean, he was a 19th century psychologist who did the original research on this, that as it says in the slide here, that 50% of information is forgotten within an hour. I made a note that, and then it's 70% within 24 hours. And I think, and Danny, this is obviously this is your expertise, but I just think it's exaggerated, the more digital information that is just pushed into our heads, that you just are forgetting even faster than ever, because there's just so much.
Yeah, and I suppose Ebbinghaus also did the primacy and recency effect, which obviously is part of the forgetting curve. And so short-term memory only lasts between 20 and 30 seconds without rehearsal or active maintenance of a piece of information. So it's very limited capacity. So I suppose when we're thinking about our work and putting together content for our learners, how do we sort of use that and apply it in this current world? So what we'd say is like focus on the first impression and the last thing that you say, and then obviously there's the middle part. So translated into sort of business continuity purposes in presentations, in learning, in any learning content, and in reports that you do. So if you're particularly trying to influence people or create a desired outcome, then focus on the first impression, or you mention the task, the product that you want someone to do, and always kind of remain positive about that, and also make the final summary positive as well. Or even better, I mean, a call to action would be better at the final point in any discussion, which will have more impact. So make sure the important things are mentioned at the start, and take advantage of the primacy effect. Then like the middle, so the middle of your content or a report, this should basically review things that you already know. So you wouldn't put your most important information right in the middle of your content, because that wouldn't make sense for someone to retain that information. So you just want to reiterate things in the middle. And at the end, you should be recapping the start and your main learning points, or creating a call to action around those first learning points. So I suppose that's how we can really adapt this to meetings, learning design, and influencing others. So and sort of driving better behaviour comes from making content more interactive, and basically hosting a clear benefit for the users. Making sure we're not saying you're just ticking a box when you're learning, but we can obviously discuss that over the next few slides about thriving and making things more beneficial for your learners as well.
Given that people, particularly right now, have additional stresses, or a lot of people have additional stresses, we all know people who are homeschooling their children, or who are caring for, elderly parents, or, additional stresses that weren't there in 2019 that suddenly were there in 2020, and these, additional potential financial stresses and so forth, that what we know in the learning context is that when people are in an anxiety state, it makes it very, very difficult to learn. I think it's when you're in an anxiety state, your adrenal levels are high, you're unable to access your prefrontal cortex of your brain that manages things like memory and learning, and critical thinking. And so when people are stressed, learning becomes exceptionally difficult. And so how, Danny, do we get learners to be able to come into a more relaxed mindset? Or what things can we do to get them to be in a more relaxed mindset, such that they may thrive versus be in that fight or flight, survive mode?
I mean, I think we've got to think about the current situation that they're in as humans as a start, and actually provide something that is beneficial to them. And I think starting out, we should always ask ourselves the question, what's in it for them? Because that's the first thing they will be asking. So I know obviously we have to report on things, report on utilisation, assignment figures, etc. But we need to be thinking, are our learners, are our people in a relaxed state? So making things more conscious, being more mindful. Are they going to feel better or gain something personally from engaging in this development time? So a lot of things right now are happening on autopilot. A lot of people think it's Groundhog Day every single time they wake up, with nothing new going on. So we need to create a space for people to be mindful. Learning what mindfulness is a good start, and how to use it to adapt your approach to work and life. And I think as managers and as leaders, we need to come at tasks and everything from a personal, maybe a human angle, rather than a task orientated one. We've got to realise that the people who we're asking to be motivated, the people who we're asking to complete these things, these courses, these development opportunities, are all human, and are all going through the same or similar things to what we are. So always come at it from a human angle, I would say.
Yeah, and it seems like even before 2020, it seemed like, soft skills obviously got a lot of attention,
Hmm.
and it became much less of a nice to have and became like a need to have. And
Yeah.
then along comes 2020, and it was like, wow, it is such a need to have. I mean, doing things like you're saying, like mindfulness training, some of the courses that we offer around, I mean, we have a mindfulness collection. Danny, we have, something about, well-being collection or whatever it is. And those things may have been seen in the past as like, oh, that's just kind of fluffy.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely critical, because again, people can't think straight if they're
Hmm.
stressed out. People can't think straight if they don't know how to manage their own, mental state. They can't learn the quote unquote hard skills if
Yeah.
they're in a state of anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. And everything that, if you look at the people who may have thrived in 2020 and obviously leading into this year, they're the people who know the most about themselves, that are more resilient, that are more mindful about what they do, that are more grateful, and that turn away from the computers more, that have more, they're more present. Those are the sorts of people that seem to have thrived in a world that's sort of completely crazy around us. And those are the sorts of things that we should be encouraging. So yeah, like you said, we have courses on mindfulness, on well-being, and just really focusing on developing as a person. So really giving our sort of learners the benefit of that self-reflection time.
Danny, maybe you could speak a little bit about,
Yeah.
this idea of versus promotion
Yeah.
versus policing. So, and we've kind of touched on this, but the idea, as you said before, about the way to always launch any kind of new training course is to let people know what they're going to get out of it. Like, this is good for you. This is good for you. This isn't, you have to do this. Oh, you're being forced to do your training, to really start with that promotion piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I suppose I would draw similarities between a marketing department and the learning department, and what learning people can take from the marketing department. So, I'm absolutely positive that your job isn't just to run reports and tell people off for not completing the training on time. That isn't what we do. That isn't why we're in this industry. So we want to see behavioural change. So when someone in marketing wants to change your behaviour, they'll promote their product and highlight the benefits to the potential consumer. So we need to learn from that and be like, actually, L&D is no different to this. We want our teams to see value in the content. We want them to see what experiences they can personally have and what we're offering them. So we want them to actively seek it out and talk about it within the teams as well. So promoting it and the benefits is a really, really it's the only way to go about it, really, unless you want to sit in a never-ending cycle of reports and tick box and utilization forms. So, and obviously our ultimate goal is behavioural change. So, and that requires motivation. So I've actually been looking into a sports psychologist recently from Chelsea Football Club, based in the UK. So his name is Tim Harkness, and he's come up with his own formula for motivation, which I think is actually really good. So, and I think it can be really linked to learning and how people approach a task. So his formula was reward divided by the task times by confidence equals motivation. So basically, we make a task too large. So, for example, you've got to complete 10 training courses that were assigned to you, and you've got to do this by Friday. That creates a really large task and one with very little reward, unless you're like, yeah, I've completed my compliance training, which I don't know how many people do, but and therefore the motivation to complete all that will be really low. So if we flip it, to create highly motivated employees, having a small task with a high reward. So, for example, completing a 5-minute course on mindfulness will help you become more focused. And even if you just take one learning point from it, learners can then be confident that I can definitely achieve that. I'm gaining something from it, therefore I'll be motivated to do it. So I think it's a really good formula for assessing motivation and breaking it down in terms of tasks. And I suppose, yeah, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I know that isn't new to anybody, but especially in a pandemic, we need to be thinking that everybody isn't in the same boat. I think I heard a nice quote saying everyone's in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. So we need to be thinking about people's physiological needs. So are your employees getting the absolute basics? So understanding this will show you in your results of engagement, definitely so. Things on the very, very bottom of obviously this hierarchy, safety, security. So we need to check these are being met. So, I mean, right now in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in the US, I believe a lot of people are struggling with the safety of the jobs in general across the country, and therefore what comes after that, they're the homes, and they're experiencing are they going to have security long term? We don't know. So we need to really we need to employ a lot of empathy there when assuming that they're all at the potential to perform, because they absolutely might not be. So we need to be providing belonging for people, so within our teams, and ensuring that we're celebrating effort, celebrating a job well done, and helping our learners to actually feel accomplished, because if they feel like they belong, that's their basic physiological needs being met to a certain extent. We've just got to understand and respect that we can't expect things like new ideas, full engagement and innovation from a team that's basic needs aren't being met. So that's something that's obviously really important to think about.
And Danny, we have a question. Someone is asking you to please repeat that formula again. I think the motivation formula.
Yeah, no problem. It's reward divided by task times by confidence equals motivation.
One more time, even just for my brain to process that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, so reward divided by the task, if we're putting it in formula in brackets, times by confidence to achieve it, and that'll equal the motivation.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and that was made. So that was by sports psychologist Tim Harkness. In case you wanted to sort of have a look into that.
Okay, all right. We got a thank you from our question asker. So okay, great. Okay, moving on.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay, so we've talked a bit about several of these areas, but so as discussed, it is now not a nice to have to provide training on things like well-being, mindfulness, empathy, work-life balance. That these now we know that in order to really have high-performing people, that this is a critical piece of the mix. And then these other areas, as we all know, compliance is always going to be required. It's never been negotiable. And then there's the role-specific training, of course, that's going to be going on even more, as we discussed, with all of the reskilling that's been going on in that category. And then I know we want to talk a lot about this, company culture, which is, we've talked on our team, Danny, as you know, people who formerly were going into an office and they really were connected to the company and they felt engaged and involved and important, and that's a little, well, it's a lot more challenging to do when everyone goes remote, and in order to continue that sense of engagement and commitment to the company, that training can take a piece of that to keep people involved.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got some examples of what some of our clients have actually done. A few might actually be on the call today, which is great. So a lot of our clients aren't office based. They have obviously manufacturing facilities, they have factories. So and what they've done for like role specific things is make live YouTube style videos and roll them out as content, which has actually worked really well for them. So this has worked really well in like the automotive industry, or industries where actually taking a look at something that's physically in front of you is really, really important. So what they've done is find a new way to showcase new products by recording the new functions and then rolling that out as training. So it's not necessarily on a slide and you click next and next. That would just not not be good for especially a hands-on visual person. And so like normally when employees would visit like innovation centres and hubs to be like immersed in the experience, they're now going to have to do it virtually. So using these recordings, real employee stories, and they've seen some really good benefits from that. And it's actually brought the company culture more together, which is obviously nice to hear. And I suppose on top of that as well, some companies, obviously, we actually forget, people have been recruited into companies within the last year. They've never met the colleagues, they've never been to a head office, they've never met a human who works in the same company as them. So how have they been onboarded? So some onboarding examples have been where they would record like a walkthrough of the head office, maybe the management team record introductions to themselves and then put them forward as part of their onboarding, which is nice to sort of put faces to names and also feel a bit more integrated in what would be a strange time, and say, right, this is the head office for when you come back, and sort of show them around. So I think that's a really cool idea, and sort of helped really solidify that you are part of a new business now. So I suppose if you've employed anybody new, it might be a good way to involve people and a good introduction to your company and your culture. So yeah, we're on the final bit about the balancing act. Yeah, so I know we put reporting there because obviously we all have to do our reporting, and yes, compliance is important and will need to be completed, but just be mindful of the other pressures and timescales around mandatory training. So maybe relax the reporting if you have the authority to do so on anything that isn't imperative to business performance. So instead focus on the conversations you're having with your teams and the behavioural change as a result. And if you've ever been on a webinar with me before or anything in the UK at any of our events, so I've talked about learning champions probably for the last 4 years, but it's something that we've found really works. So you would engage people in every single team across your business to be the person in that team that is your ears to the ground. So get feedback from them on what works, what doesn't, what people are interested in, make it into a competition, see who gets the most benefit by doing certain things, and take the feedback and actually do something with it as well. Yeah, so in terms of any big change, especially in these times, learning champions and having someone that isn't necessarily on your team but is on your team kind of figuratively is a really good move. And yeah, so recently we did also a learn and tell, shall we say. So I set my team a task recently where they had to come to a team meeting armed with something that they had learned, and that was the instruction, like learn something. And so I didn't tell them to go on to an intranet. I didn't tell them to go and do any specific courses. So we had people investigating internal systems that they weren't used to, that they wanted to improve on. Someone finding out about a brand new topic, brought that back to the team. Some started a new hobby and wanted to talk about the new way that they started doing crochet and knitting. So what it did, it was allowed us an hour to actually sit together, learn something new, and everyone kind of shared it in their own way. There was no pressure of a test or anything like that. We were all just sat there discussing, well, in our own respective homes to the screen, but we were sat there discussing what we learned, and it was actually a really nice way to go about things. So, and again, it's just about creating that safe environment to like learn, test out new ideas, and make mistakes as well. So I feel like creating a culture of learning and behavioural change will never happen until your team are motivated to try new things that benefit them first.
I love that. And I love that you didn't have any guardrails around it. It was just go learn anything.
Yeah, go learn.
Go learn something.
Yeah, and come back with something. And obviously a few people were like, oh, what does that mean? Like, so, but I think quite a lot of people, like, and there was only, I think, maybe 3 of the team that came back with anything that was specifically job related. The rest kind of just went out and brought new things back, which was nice.
Yeah, I love that. And that is a true culture of learning, because it's not always that, it doesn't need to necessarily be your direct job skill.
No.
It's really just having a a mindset of learning, of continual development, and in any regard or in any aspect of your life.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I definitely recommend it.
That's a great tip. I love that.
So I think I don't know if we've got any questions on any of those. I'm happy to sort of expand on any of those. So we've got a question there. So what do you think the future of online learning will look like? Will we ever go back to in-person training? I believe that we will. I think it'll always now be weighted toward online. But I think because of the amount of time that we as humans have spent apart from each other, I think that when the opportunity arises to have that person-to-person contact and actually be in an environment where we can ask questions more freely, we can, especially as a person sort of who would deliver training, be able to just see someone's body language and engage with them as well. I don't know what you think about that, Sam.
I 100% agree, and yeah, I don't really have anything further to add to that one, Danny. We have another question that I think is kind of being directed at you, which is, can you talk a little bit about the generational aspects of training and onboarding right now? That's a really interesting question and something that you've probably thought about.
Yeah, and it's something that I've come across so much in my career. And I mean, I obviously work in technology now, but I previously worked in construction. So there are obviously two very different industries that have very different requirements. And when I first started, I was the training manager in a large UK construction company, and my team were the first person I managed was 30 years my senior. So that was a very sort of, it turned out to be a great relationship in the end, but we needed a lot of communication between us about expectations, about, well, we've always done it this way, so what's next? And it's just sort of integrating the two. So maybe sort of reflecting on the previous question about, will we go back to in-person training? We've just got to sort of move along with the times, but also have a nod to the fact that not everyone works in this way. I mean, I've had hands-on guys who had been crane trainers for 30, 40 years, and then suddenly I was saying, right, so we're all going to log on to this system, and they were like, no, I'm not going to do that. And it's a daunting task to know that you work in an industry that isn't as receptive to fully just switching online. So I think, especially in terms of what the next generation will be like, they're used to everything being online, whereas people who are still in the workforce are not going to be used to having everything online. We've got to adapt in that way, but also I think adapt back. I think adapt to our older generation of people, as well as the younger ones who are more au fait with all sorts of systems. I think I'd like to consider myself somewhere in the middle. I'm not exactly up with all the new technology, but then also I do like to be face to face as well. So I would hope our generational sort of differences would iron themselves out.
And it's interesting, there are some experts out there that completely are, feel very strongly that there are no generational, differences, that this whole idea of training millennials differently than you train someone who's in their 50s or whatever, that there are some serious learning thought leaders out there that say, no, there's no difference. Learning is learning. And then, so it's a big debate. I mean, I read up on this a bit. It's a big debate over, is it even a thing? And personally, I think it is a thing. I personally think that, yes, people who are digital natives, quote unquote, who have done everything online their entire lives, I do personally believe that they learn differently than those of us who actually had like a book in our hands, or something when we were younger. So, but again, big debate.
I mean, I would agree. I would agree with you that there are differences. Like, people are brought up differently. Some people who I've worked with were brought up in a world where like TVs weren't a thing. So how can they be the same sort of learner? How can they be have the same mindset as someone who has never had a device fall out of their hand or less than 5% charged? It's never,
Yeah.
it's never going to be the same. And I suppose we have got to realize our entire workforce is so, like, represent so many ages and so many generations that don't forget either end of the spectrum, really.
Yeah, I think it's just something probably as like individual organizations need to consider and experiment with a little bit and see, you know, are you rolling out different kinds of training to different, you know, generations of learners?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think getting the expertise of the people that have been in industries for 20, 30 plus years is invaluable. And they need to have a hand in how things are running throughout time. And I think, again, some people forget that and think, well, digital is the way forward, we're only doing it this way, when in fact they could learn some valuable lessons from the people with the experience.
Yeah, yeah. We have another really good question here, Danny, that's quite specific, and it has to do with we're being asked, what are some good ways as a small training department to have an impact on a large organization?
Yeah.
We're a team of 4, and I would presume a large organization means, above, mid-market, like, a large enterprise.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I've done that. I've been that team, or part of that team. So I was originally a team of 4. Well, I was a team of 1 for a while, but team of 4 in a large business. And I think the first thing that I particularly went in with was understanding the systems and making sure that the scheduling, it depends on what sort of systems you currently have in place. So an LMS that actually helps you rather than hinders you, and maybe investing in the time to have a basic functioning LMS so that you can control what's going on and so that your basics are covered. And then second to that would be to sort of if you have someone in your team that is happy to be exposed to the business, so do things like these, like webinars to the business, bulletins, work with your marketing team, and sort of build a rapport with the marketing team in the sense that they can promote you within the business and what you're doing. And like I said earlier, the learning champions, if you can have 1 or 2 people in a wide range of teams that you have a quarterly meeting with, and they have to bring something back, like make it a reward that they're part of that team. I don't know sort of your budget or anything, but if there is some leeway to compensate them in some way, vouchers or something, if they are part of your learning champions team. So you're sort of fostering people in different areas of the business. You'll get a range of feedback back then that you can actually work on, and it'll feel to people like the team is listening to the training team is listening to the wider business as well. So yeah, so like I said, the basic in terms of LMS and tracking, scheduling was the first thing. And get your learning champions on board, and also say yes to all of the promotional activities you can get involved with that time will allow.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really great advice. I think we have time for one more question. So we're being asked, how do I develop, I think this is in regard to just sort of business continuity content in general. I'm making that assumption. How do I develop this type of content? What can I roll out right away when I'm underwater with other initiatives?
Well, I would say our content, but well, we have an off-the-shelf library. There it is. So yeah. So I would say look at what is already available in your business. In that sense, and be selective. I think about what you're trying to achieve and what you're looking for. Be selective. Make sure that you are looking at behavioural change, and make sure you are sort of like fostering a culture to start off with, so that people are receptive to this business continuity idea. I mean, we should have been being like this the entire time. We should have business continuity plans in place, but no one ever expected to be out of normal life for so long. And I think it's, I mean, me personally, I'm not necessarily a planner, but you need to be in this situation, and obviously depending on the size of your business, whether you can plan for another year of this, and like we said earlier, like you can't put a timestamp on anything if the world leaders can't and get things under control. So I would sit down and plan, sit down and review, and get feedback as well. Get feedback on how things have worked in this last year. So if you've tried your best to roll out a new system, some new content, and it's not worked, or it might have worked, get some feedback from the business on how it's gone. And then you can put that into your plan. You can assess the opportunities that you've got, the gaps where you could work a bit better, a bit smarter, and just sort of don't put this last year down to anything other than experience. Just gain what you can from it, and then you can put that into your business continuity plans going forward.
Okay, and then I just want to add to that, Danny, because I know we are launching 2 new courses, right, in Q2.
Yeah.
That are specific. They're specific to business continuity management. And I just want to let folks on the call know, and you can speak to it specifically, but I know we do have 2 new courses coming out this year that are going to be talking about basically benefits of business continuity, key terminology, how do you conduct a business impact assessment, key components, etc., risk management. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more on that, but I do know that that's something for our customers that is coming.
Yeah, and I mean, you've covered all like sort of the main topics there anyway, but yeah, definitely in terms of risk management and learning from your previous year and what's happened with your team, with different companies within your industry and things like that. So yeah, so definitely crisis planning as well, how you would go about that. How, like, the question I suppose is, how do we even start if it's not something that our teams have done before, or even if the business isn't putting together a continuity plan, how do I put together a continuity plan for my team? That's a really good way of sort of looking at it, and where the course will help. Actually, if it's not a business run thing, if it's not something that your business is doing, you can take ownership of that, and you can sit these courses, learn, actually, I know what I can do. I know how I can adapt this to my team performance, how I can have an impact on the business in that way.
Well, that's great. Yeah, and so any customers on the call today, just do keep your eyes peeled for that coming, because we're obviously here to help out with that. If you're already using SAP Litmos training content, that's something to probably rely on in Q2. Well, great. Well, we are pretty much at the top of the hour, so I think we should probably wrap things up. I think we covered all of our questions. Thank you very much, everyone, for asking great questions, and we've got some nice comments as well. We appreciate those. And so I think we can wrap it up. And Danny, thank you so much for co-hosting this today with your lovely marketing department, and we appreciate your expertise so much as being a content expert. So thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye.